Whether you're looking for answers to specific life questions or seeking to become the best version of you possible, welcome to the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast, where we offer insight, information, and strategies based upon research and years of practice as clinical psychologists. So sit back, have a listen, and get connected with our hosts, Dr. Berney Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall. Welcome back, Richard. Today we're continuing our discussion of video games with an article that is probably one of our favorite articles of this week from The Telegraph, entitled, "Is Video Gaming Bad for You? The Science for and Against."
Right.
And this is also from earlier this month. Right. So it's interesting. You know, we started to talk about covering this topic before looking up some of the articles and things like that we were going to talk about, and then it's unbelievable that just this same month all of these articles came out about video gaming, the good and the bad.
Yeah, the good news here is that serious researchers are taking a serious and in-depth look at this question.
Right.
Okay. And what I like about this is this is about what does the science say? What does the really good research say about this? Not what is your opinion? What do you think? What is your theory? This article is based on really serious research done by top-notch people.
I thought you were going to say top snot.
Top snot? No.
Top snot people.
Top notch. It's hard to say that. P in the end. But anyway. Well done, a good review, and it's based on science. And you know, science is taking a big hit these days in our country. It's been debunked, and there's alternative facts, and science doesn't. We have, whether it's climate change or whatever it is. Right. People don't trust science anymore, whether it's medicine or climate or whatever. But like it or not, it's the only way that we have to study these questions, and we have to live by these rules. And this is another area where good science can really be informative.
Yep.
And that's what I really appreciate about this article.
Absolutely.
It's really well done. If anybody's really interested in the science behind video games, this is a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have a link in the show notes, but this article goes through 6 topics, 6 points. Right. Some for video games, some against video games.
And that's another nice feature of this article. They present the argument for and the arguments against. Not that you'd have to decide whether you're for or against, but here's what the research says.
Right. Yeah. So the first one is that is one in support of video games, or something that's positive about video games.
Right.
And that is that some research has suggested that video games can help your brain grow.
It actually grows, yeah.
And we'll be talking about this a little bit more with Dr. Madigan, whose interview we'll be posting on Saturday. But
he's another serious researcher.
Right.
You know, the reason we selected him is he's been studying this for a long time.
He's been looking into it a lot.
He's been very thoughtful.
Really pulling together a lot of the information. And so what the research seems to suggest is that depending on the type of video game that you play, and this kind of goes back to what we talked about on Tuesday, our podcast from just a couple of days ago on can video games change your brain?
Right.
The idea that depending on the type of video game that you're playing, there may be a change in your brain. If you're playing games that are heavily requiring memory and strategy and things like that, those regions of your brain are strengthened.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to explain to people when you and I talk about the brain changes. Okay. But you don't really grow new neurons.
Right.
There are a couple of times in your life when new neurons appear. What you do is, and I liken it to, if you could imagine what fertilizer does to the roots of a plant.
Right.
Where, you have a few roots coming down, but if you fertilize those roots, they become much more complex, much thicker, much more robust. Okay. And that's kind of what happens with the brain when you use it. So if you're playing a video game that makes you track an object, your brain you fertilize the part of your brain that does tracking.
Right.
If you play a video game that demands memory, then you fertilize the part of your brain. So for humans, doing an activity is like fertilizing the roots of a plant. You're going to grow you're going to increase the density of whatever area whatever part of the brain you're activating.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in this case, the first one was
makes your brain grow.
Yeah, it makes you. It does. If you're playing a video game that requires you, I heard you talking to somebody about this the other day. That if you're playing, because you know more about video game. I mean, you play video games. Mm-hmm. That if you're playing a video game that demands that you remember something, and I think you said Mario Brothers, it demands that you remember something.
Right, you get better at it when you remember.
That was it.
Yeah, when you have to remember the sequence in which different opponents come out, or the different strategies. Right.
And whereas some games don't require that you have to remember everything. Right. Every scene is new.
Right.
And so if you're playing Mario Brothers and you have to remember, if you get better by remembering things, then you're going to fertilize the memory parts of your brain.
Right.
If you're doing a reaction time, then you're going to get better at that.
Right.
And that's what this part of the article talks about.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now the second one is that it is against. And
that's a very violent scene there.
It is.
I had to scroll up because I couldn't watch it more than a couple of times. The poor little mime, geez.
Nobody knows what you're talking about.
I know, but
it's in the video. There's a little
video clip about a guy who gets an elbow to the face.
Because this next one is against video games, saying that video games make you more violent. Now,
right.
I have to take a deep breath with this one because the research, and again, we go into this in much more detail because this was one of the specific topics we talked to Dr. Madigan about.
Well, are we talking? Do they differentiate between aggression and violence?
Throughout this article, we talk about it in different ways. Yeah.
All right.
So the idea is there are some articles that say that video games can make you more violent. However, we really need to make sure that we go in and look at those articles and those studies to identify what they describe as violent behavior. As Dr. Madigan talks about, and you'll hear in that interview, sometimes they refer to things as violent behavior that we wouldn't typically define as violent behavior. And one of them was a study that I had never heard of that he mentioned, where they said that people who played video games may be more likely to put hot sauce on somebody's sandwich. That could be seen as aggressive behavior, which is what the researchers described it as aggressive, violent behavior. But it's also could be seen as a prank or a joke or, lots of other things. And so, we have to be very careful with it. Does it, the research to me isn't as clear in this area. And even this section of the article is much more short.
Because there's a difference between aggression and violence.
Right.
You can be aggressive without being violent.
Right.
Putting hot sauce on somebody's hot fudge sundae might be aggressive, but it's not violent.
Right.
Okay. So one of the things when scientists study this issue, they have to differentiate one from the other.
Right.
And one of the areas where video games have been, Mark Applebaum has done some work. I think has done some work in this area, and he talks about do you have an attitude change? And so he talks about people who play these. What do you call them? First person shooter games. People who tend to play these more aggressive kinds of games have less decreased pro-social behaviors, decreased empathy. But again, it's cause and effect.
Right.
Are people who are less pro-social playing those video games because they get their kicks, or is the video game making them pro-social?
Right.
And this chicken and egg question comes up again and again in the aggression and violence research.
Right.
Okay.
Because again, if we consider the fact that millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people play these video games,
play shooter video games.
Right. All of those people aren't aggressive.
That's right. They're not violent. They are not all antisocial.
Right.
Not everybody who plays video games becomes antisocial.
Right.
You're not antisocial. You've played Call of Duty.
That's true. That's correct.
Have you ever?
Be quiet. Oh,
no, I was going to ask about what's that one that everybody hates? The video game.
Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah. Not that everybody hates it. People who
Parents
play
hate
it love it.
Parents hate it.
Some parents hate it.
Right, because it's pretty violent. But not everybody who plays Grand Theft Auto becomes antisocial.
Right.
Okay. Otherwise, the world would be filled with, there'd be millions of antisocial kids running around.
Right. Now, the third is one that is pro video games, and it says that video games make you more self-aware and happier.
And what is the study of happiness called?
Well,
there's a word for this, and I didn't know. Did you know that?
I didn't know this word. Eudaimonics.
Eudaimon. That must be like eudaimon.
Yeah.
Eudaimomics
is the theory or art of happiness.
I didn't know that.
So there we go. There's our word of the day.
Increase your vocabulary.
We need like a little chime to go
Eudaimomics.
off. Yeah. So what we're saying here is that, and this should make sense. You know, when we play video games, because we enjoy playing video games, it makes you happy. It makes you, more satisfied, more, and it mentions self-aware, because you have a sense of well-being. You are just more, more happy.
Yeah, we talked about this in another one of our podcasts this week, that the people who study happiness say that you need three things. You need to feel autonomous, you need to feel competent, and you need to feel like you're connected with other people. And she argues that the author of this is a woman, she argues that video games provide this.
Right.
You become more competent, you interact more with other people, because it's a social event, and you are autonomous because you're able to make the decisions. In these games, you're making the decisions, and it puts you in charge. So she argues that the games are designed specifically to do these three things.
Right.
And so kids who play video games tend to be happier.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now the next is against video games, and it says video games make you less empathic.
Right.
And here in the article they mentioned Grand Theft Auto, and it talks about the idea that that people who play, especially these aggressive, violent video games, tend to be less empathic, meaning that they seem to have a decreased ability or willingness or interest in understanding the feelings and thoughts and emotions of others.
I think this is the first time I read this, I missed it. The second time I read the article, it clicked. I think this is one of the key features of this article. And what it is that what they've learned, what researchers have learned, is if you identify with the violent character, you become less empathic. When you watch a movie, the good guys and the bad guys are easy to separate. And most of us identify with the good guys.
Right.
Okay? With video games, because you're a participant, you could be playing the video game from the point of view of the bad guy.
Right.
Okay? That's how video games are structured. As long as you don't identify, and I think this is where most kids who play video games don't identify with the bad guy.
Right.
Otherwise, you'd have every video game player would be violent. And so if parents want to watch for a danger with video games, it's who's your child identifying with. And if they come back and say, well, I really like this guy because he kills people and he rapes and he assaults people and he beats people up, that may be a cause for concern because he's identifying with the bad guy.
Right. And even with that, I think you have to be a little bit cautious in generalizing too much, because there's certainly people who like the bad guy, but there's a difference between liking the bad guy, liking to play as the bad guy, and identifying with the bad guy.
Exactly. Actors can play the role of the bad guy, but they're nice people.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so you're right. Be very cautious.
Right.
There are professional athletes that we view as bad guys. I guess are there bad guys in soccer?
Oh yeah.
There are.
Yeah.
And so it's okay to, you're going to still watch the match and everything, but most people don't identify with the hooligans.
Right.
Okay. Whether it's football or baseball or basketball, whatever it is,
right.
We typically don't identify with the bad guy.
Yeah.
So again, it's a yes, but is the answer. Mm-hmm.
Now the next is another one for video games, and it says that video gaming improves your eyesight.
Yeah.
And this really goes back to some of the same stuff, that when you are doing something repeatedly, that you're going to strengthen those skills or those neural pathways responsible for those actions.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I did not know this. Yeah. And I wouldn't. It was cataracts, right? Wasn't it?
Right.
People who had cataract surgery. And cataract is a sort of a filmy covering on your eye. And you can have surgery, but you don't get back to normal vision. Mm-hmm. But people who had surgery and played a video game, like, what was it, 40 hours in a month?
Right.
40 hours in a month.
Over a month-long period.
And that it improved, they actually improved their vision, and they measured it by where you are on the Snellen chart.
Right.
You know, on the E chart, or you go to the doctor's office and you have to identify. And you can go down a row or two lower after you play video games. This, to me, because we've been laughing about this all week, I don't, self-disclosure here, I don't play video games. I may start, because as you get older, you lose vision.
There you go.
Right? So this would be a compelling reason for me to play video games.
See, that's all we needed.
So,
was a reason.
But I'm not very good at it, I have to say. But it doesn't matter.
I'll beat you.
Doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
That I'm very good at it.
No.
And I don't have any, my kids are graduating and leaving, but they could teach me this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
The next one, I think, and the last one is,
it is.
The final one is that video games. This is 4. Mm-hmm. Video games can fix attention problems.
Now, you had to be surprised with this, right?
Yeah. Because we often associate ADHD with video games because they say that, it's the video games and TV and media and all that kind of stuff has resulted in some of the or has helped contribute, I guess is the best way to say, some of the increased prevalence of ADHD, but maybe not.
This was the second surprise that I saw in this article, because when we got to attention, I thought, okay, here we'll find out that it really is a negative. And then I saw these flashing in the article. If you get it electronically, there's these flashing colors. There's a test called the Stroop color word test, and what the challenge is that you have to give the color of the ink rather than the name of the color. So the color green will be in purple ink, and the color red, the word red will be in blue ink. And the brain automatically reads the word rather than identifies the color.
Once we become readers, our brain the default is to read.
To read the word.
Right.
And so you have to suppress that urge to read the word to read the color. And it's a test we use clinically. We've been using it for decades now. Yeah. And video gamers are better at this color word test than non-gamers. Right. And that surprised me, because this test is used as a test of inhibition and attention. The ability to attend and inhibit. And it's well recognized in psychology.
And really, it's one of my favorite tests to use when I'm looking at ADHD, but now I'm really going to have to reconsider how I'm using it, because if kids who play video games a lot are better at this, then
you almost have to know if they play video. How much?
Yeah.
You almost want to ask how many hours of video games do you play a week?
Exactly.
Because it becomes a variable in our clinical decision making.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and who would have known? So.
I had no idea.
Good research. So, but again, so this article, the link to this article is in the show notes. Please read it. There's lots of great links to it. Links to other things. Links to a TED Talk by this woman
Daphne,
who talks about the brain on video games. Daphne Bavelier. I don't know. We'll just say it that way. Bavelier. I'm not.
That's close.
Yeah.
She's from MIT, right? Yeah, she's an MIT graduate at least. Yeah. She did a TED Talk on this, and I'm going to listen to that again too, because she has a lot of good information.
Absolutely.
But this is really a good one. I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
So anybody interested?
Yeah. Anything else? Nope. That's it for today.
No, I'm just going to play video games because it's going to make me a 10 better. It's going to make me better at the Stroop task, and it's going to improve my vision.
Finally.
What should I start with? I tried Mario Brothers. I failed.
Grand Theft Auto.
Oh, there you go.
All right.
I'm going to become less empathic.
Let's just start with Tetris.
Oh.
Pong.
Pac-Man.
Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.
No matter how hard I try.